Morning, Forrest.
I got a
That's
story to start us out. Are you ready for this?
sure. Give me,
My
give me.
my wife went on a trip with my daughter to Texas with the youth group, and pastor was paying for the gas. Uh, the youth pastor, I should say, and he went to go pay for it, and like she was in the car the whole time while he was messing with it, and he got in the car like, "Hey, we're good to go." And obviously it filled up or whatever. She's like, okay, let's go. So she headed off, and all of a sudden, junk. And she looked back, and she had a new tail on the car. She had the gas pump um pipe from the gas pump following her. She's like, oh no, what do I do?
She
She got
ripped
like,
it ripped off.
yeah, she ripped it off.
Oh my God.
I mean, I saw that in real life once where the car was just like speeding through the intersection. I'm like, they're in so much trouble. But Amanda called me. She's like, I'm like a block away from the gas station. What do I do? And then somebody, like one of the teens, was like, can we have it for a souvenir? Like, no, what? No. Like, your first instinct is like, run. If you don't get caught, you don't get caught, sort of a thing. And I'm like, well, I mean, no obvious explosions. They probably, it's probably covered under insurance or whatever. So, just go back and see if they need it, or I don't know, like what needs to be done. I'm like, dang it, this is gonna cost a fortune if we have to like do something about it. But I'm like, might as well. So she went back and I'm like, oh, thanks. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, you're fine. See you later. So, like, just FYI, if you ever like rip off a gas thing, it's designed to rip off cleanly and not just like explode. And apparently it happens enough that like there's no like major consequences. So take it back, I guess. Or not. Like maybe if you just want a souvenir, but that's pretty stinky for a souvenir.
Yeah, there's a gas station near my house. It's about 45 minutes south of of my house. So like bit south of Portland in this town called Woodburn.
Um,
And it's an Arco station. And Arco is almost always the cheapest gas, right? Like in our area. I don't know if it is in the Midwest, but um yeah, around here, Arco is like the cheapest usually. But this Arco is like they don't have their prices up on their sign.
oh, mm-hmm.
And in Oregon, they pump your gas for you sometimes, right?
Most of the time, yeah.
Yeah. So I got there. I was like, it was late at night. I was driving home. There's a Chevron. They have their signs all lit up and their prices. And this was like, I don't know if gas prices were quite as bad as they are now, but it was, a time when they were pretty bad, definitely in the $4 range. Um, so I saw that and I was like, well, I should go to this Arco because Arco is always cheaper, right? The guy, like, is weird. He's like, it's really late. The gas pumper guy seems like he's on drugs or something, you know.
Oh,
And he's like, I want you to come look at the something that make sure it's okay. And so I went out there and like glanced and I was like, yeah, fill it up with regular. I didn't notice that the gas prices were like it was like $7 a gallon.
oh wow.
So I like looked at the bill and it was like well over $100 for the gas, like way more than I was expecting.
Well,
And my wife drives a Mercedes, so you're supposed to fill it up with
premium.
elite grade, but yeah, premium really. And like so it was just like nightmare
Oh
of
dear.
a expense that we were not expecting. We looked it up and every review, they have like 1.8 stars on Google. Every review is like, this place is a ripoff. Like, they don't show their prices well enough. Like, the guy was kind of like, there's a rule that they have to show you the price. They don't advertise it on their sign. So that's why he called me out there to look at it. But I didn't know I was looking for a price. I wasn't, I was like, I didn't know that, I was saying, yes, I will pay $7 a gallon for this gas. So
Yeah.
It was
Especially if he
horrible.
mumbles or if he's on drugs. They hire him specifically for that. Oh, you have a
Yeah,
terrible slur. I'll hire you right away.
yeah.
Problem? Okay with you?
Oh yeah, and apparently if you call them on it or complain, they get like super aggressive and stuff. So yeah,
Oh, jeez.
like Woodburn Arco. Don't go to the Woodburn Arco. It's like,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. Anyway,
That's crazy.
yeah, how are things going in general?
School starts up pretty soon. As a bus driver, I did a dry run where I just basically did my route without any kids just to make sure that everything is as it's supposed to be, which is good because the high school is doing construction and they had this like giant dumpster next to the cars and I had to like squeeze through and I had about 2 inches of clearance on both sides of
That's
my,
very close.
what is it, like 10-foot wide bus or something.
School
But I
bus,
made
yeah.
I made it through, but I was just like, dispatch, can you call the school to move this dumpster back, please? And they're like, sure, we'll get on that. So, but I'm 2 inches of clearance. I do that in traffic all the time. I'm just like, I'll make this a turn lane. I'm like, the guys are like, the people in the car are like, when I'm at an intersection, I have to turn left. I literally kind of have to scooch in the lane that is oncoming traffic to my
Mhm.
right, going left. And every time people are like, because the mirror is the part that sticks out farther than the bus. Like the
Oh
bus
yeah,
is
yeah.
this and the mirrors are like this. So as long as my mirror's clear, I'm good. And sometimes the mirror literally goes over the car. And I'm just like, I'm fine. And the guys are like, sometimes I pop
That's
the curb a couple times because you gotta, with traffic.
got it. Wow. Yeah, being a bus driver or any sort of CDL, like it's impressive to me. Like making those giant
Mhm.
machines move around.
Well, I was looking at the tires of a bus I was going to drive because they sold the bus I had been driving for about 4 years to get a new one, and it hadn't arrived. So I was looking at all the other buses that were like that I could pick up, and one of the tires looked bigger than normal, and it was like at my belly button, which is, I don't know, 4 foot tall or something like that. I'm
Mhm.
like, no wonder I can pop curbs really easy. That thing is huge.
Yeah, seriously. That's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
My wife might actually pick up bus driving. She's been really kind of Um, getting into the job is hard because everything is new. But once she learned it, she's like, this is so boring. And you get to be home and do nothing between routes. And I'm frustrated that I don't have any free time. And the best time of my day, energy wise, is like during work. And then I get home and I'm exhausted, I'm spent, and I don't have any energy for my family or my kids. And you guys see me at my worst. And I'm like, yeah, pretty much. So she's like, I might pick up bus driving. I don't want to drive the big buses, but maybe the small ones. Um, and she's works great with people with developmental disability, so she'd be great. So she might do that, maybe. She wants, probably financially, it's best if I find a full-time job. The one that I almost got, they hired somebody right after they invited me to take a tour of the facility. Like that day, I was like getting ready. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna come in. They're like, no, don't come in. We hired somebody else. I'm like, dang it.
Wah,
No.
wah.
I know, I was so close to getting a pretty cool job, but whatever.
Good job.
It was going to be a place that is like a continuing education slash activity place
Hmm.
for adults with developmental disabilities. So our
Okay.
county has one that Amanda, my wife, used to work at for like 10 years.
Hmm.
Um, and this is not a county thing, it's just like somebody's passion and nonprofit thing. And I would be doing all the tech stuff. So like somebody wants to do a podcast or a vlog or a website or whatever. I just be kind of managing the teaching aspect of that. So like teaching people how to post or edit or help others do that. And so I would be the
Ah,
tech side of all of their interests, um,
cool.
doing things they couldn't do. So it was like, oh, that was pretty neat. But um, yeah, they hired somebody else, so it's okay.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Lame. Well, you'll find the right thing.
yeah. Or I'll just do buses, and then we can both have free time in the middle of the day and get to know each other again after. No. Yeah,
Yeah,
but spend time together is what I mean to say.
yeah. Well, that's yeah. Hmm. Well, we were going to talk about Dr. Ord a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
and
For
we
all of
were
our
going to talk
viewers,
about
for
this
all of
whole
our
thing.
8 viewers that might not know who Dr. Ord is,
Yeah.
Joe and I went to school at Northwest Nazarene Seminary, and he was one of the main theological professors. They have a couple different ones like Old Testament or New Testament professors, or just general biblit sort of a professor. What do they have? Like maybe 8 total professors in the God building?
I don't know because I didn't go to the seminary. I was in the music.
No, not seminary, the NNU.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you
So there
said
was,
Northwest
yeah,
Seminary. Yeah.
yeah,
But I wasn't part of the theology department, I guess is what I'm trying to
right,
say. I was in the music department. So I only had a couple of theology classes. One was Dr. Orr and one was the other lady. But there wasn't very many people. You're right. It was like 8
right.
people.
Yeah, and they might have a philosophy teacher or two, but anyway, Dr. Ord was, I thought, was pretty scandalous in some ways. He would constantly give presentations from other people, one of which like really wrecked and hurt me. He brought in this biology professor type of a person that showed how evolution and the human scheme of things seem to be more evolution based than creation. And he just kind of showed it in a way that just like really stuck with me. He's like, all of the animals that we see a link from, from like all the cats that go forth are related to a cat. That makes sense. But sometimes along the way, their genes have a little scar, like something that happened, either a virus or a genetic mutation, and something is just whacked in this particular aspect of the gene sequence. And you can see how when it goes from, house cat or jungle cat to all these other things, everything in that line, that particular break in the gene or tweak in the gene is in there as a scar. And he says that we can see this scarring happen through the evolutionary tree from all the animals. And you can see where this scar or break in the genes happens all along the way. And it even happens in humans. He says that our lineage from whatever the common ancestor was between apes and people, we weren't derived from the apes, but we had a common ancestor, the Homo erectus or Homo sapien or whatever. All they all have a similar break in their genes that seem to indicate this is how we came to be. And I was just like, I don't want to be here. He's a heretic. I hate Dr. Ord. He broke my faith, sort of thing. A couple other things that were just like, I wanted him gone, but also it seemed like it really made sense among many things he was saying. I was like, dude, like I'm surprised he's still here, like, because this is a pretty conservative place, and he's basically saying evolution is the way that God created stuff. And I'm like, man, he's a heretic. And a couple other things, like logic based, man. He said, okay, you can either have an all-loving God, an all-powerful God, or an all-knowing God, but you can't have all three because if you're all-knowing, um, even if you had a little bit of power, you could know what's happening and like maybe scooch things out of the way so like bad things don't happen to good people, but bad things do
Right.
happen to good people. So like you have a choice, like write these 3 things: all powerful, all knowing, or all loving. Mark 2 that you agree with, and then 1 that you want to like do away with. Like who's the God that you believe in? Because this is the crux, the triangle of like problems. And I'm just like, I don't like this choice either. Because like it's like he basically made us decide, how do we interpret God? And either way that we interpreted this conundrum or this problem of theodicy, which
Mhm.
is the problem of pain, made me a heretic. And I'm like, he's turning us into heretics. Like, he's the heretic, make him go away. And I never like called my pastor and told him like we need to get Dr. Ord out of the school, but I just kind of silently thought it in my heart. I was just like, this guy's a heretic. Like, he can't be here. Well, years down the line, here he is promoting LGBT stuff, LGBTQ stuff. And I'm already a heretic in a lot of different ways in my own mind, like with what I grew up with. So I'm like, well, he might be a heretic, but so am I. So let's look into this. And as I had already encountered some people who were in my Bible study, like going through seminary, like good people just showed me how they were gay and what that meant, and where the Bible might, with the 6 passages that specifically mention homosexuality, how that might be interpreted incorrectly. I kind of came to my own conclusions that maybe this is okay, but I need to do some more research. And then Dr. Ord asked me to write a chapter or two in the book that we wrote together.
Hmm.
80 different people he asked to write a chapter. So
Wow.
I was one of 80 people he kind of reached out to and wrote back a chapter in this book. So I wrote 2 chapters because it's going to be really long, or have 2 different ideas that were not fitting. So I just wrote 2 chapters. And it was fun, and I learned a lot, and I wanted to grow my YouTube and TikTok audience. So I decided to read out the whole book and post it on my channels. So I summarized
Nice.
each chapter for TikTok and posted like every weekday. And I read
Hmm.
out each chapter and posted that on YouTube. So it didn't really work. I hardly got any more followers, but I learned a lot by reading everyone else's essays verbatim, word for word, and even found a couple like errors in the editing of the book. And I sent it to Dr. Ord, and I was like, "You need to fix this." He's like, "Oh, thanks for the updated version. I'll be sure to update that." So,
Nice.
so but anyway, because he is advocating for LGBTQ plus inclusion in the Church of the Nazarene with theological backing and weight and stuff, the Church of the Nazarene freaked out and said, "Oh no, he's fully in endorsing the LGBTQ lifestyle. Either one, it's not what we Nazarenes believe. So let's kick him out." And so what they did was they set up a heresy trial. And instead of arguing any of the facts in the book, they just said, "Hey, this is what we believe. You can't be teaching that." And they ousted him. So there's the short of it.
Mhm.
But I've been talking a long time, so I'm going to let you say what you wanted to say.
Yeah, Dr. Ord is one of the rare theologians that takes the problems of evil and also like evolution, like some of the church's teaching, seriously, and like actually tries to like honestly wrestle with them instead of just saying, well, faith, it's faith, you just got to believe, like he actually tries to figure this stuff out, which, at the time sitting in his class, he talked about all that stuff that you were just talking about, like the problem of evil. And as much as I was irritated by that, like I appreciated what he does and what he did is calling into question like the dogmas that don't make sense. Because the dogmas that don't make sense, by and large, are simultaneously the things that keep people doing stuff that isn't great. I don't know how, like the dogmas that don't make sense are the things that make it so we keep people sucked in, on a team. And if everybody's following that like mindset and everybody's believing the same thing, then they'll all kind of pull together. They'll all kind of vote together. They'll all agree on the same things. And so um, of course, he's like getting excommunicated. I think I saw his like Instagram post about it. It's like defrocked and excommunicated. It's like, wow, sounds badass, you know. Um,
Yeah.
but but yeah, to me it makes sense. Like it's kind of the that like the leopards eat my face kind of meme. You know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about? It's
Yeah, that
like,
there's a song. I didn't know that the leopard was going to eat my face when I voted for the leopards eating face party.
yeah, right. I feel like being part of the Nazarene or any evangelical church is like is you're part of the Leopard's eating face church, you know, like as long as you are with the program, it's fine. But if you differ at all, it's like you're not gonna cut it. So it's best if you do differ, just shut up and just kind of pretend like you agree.
Yeah.
I mean, Dr. Oord has been going against the grain. He also got in trouble with NNU over his evolutionary stance that you were talking about earlier, not too long ago. I don't remember what happened to him. Maybe he got canned or something because of his views on evolution. But yeah.
Yeah, at some point, and I don't remember what the particular issue was, but yeah, he was barred from teaching classes at NNU.
Mhm.
So although he had tenure, which means you have a job no matter what, he was unable to teach. So I don't know what that means, because does tenure mean that you're going to be paid like for a lifetime, or does that mean you always have a teaching position? Because like he still technically has tenure, but he's not allowed to teach. So like, is he being paid? I don't know. Is he not being paid because he isn't teaching? I don't know. I need to ask that. So
No,
not that that
yeah. Now
matters,
he's
but
yeah. Now he's defrocked and excommunicated. So
yeah. I mean, and he can still participate in the Nazarene churches. He's just not a voting member. And that's really the only, that is the way the United States government defines what an organization is and how to manage that. Does that make sense? Like, the way that the US determines taxes and how they operate things as an entity, legal
mhm,
entity. They say this is how an organization needs to function. You need to have a board and voting members to have
mhm,
an organization. Uh, and then you can be a legal entity with certain rights and privileges. Um, and so you can't get a certain tax status or a organization status without that. For instance, when you set up things like a trust, like or even like a business, like with an not an LLC, but a corporation, you can have those benefits of tax status, but unless you have a annual meeting with a board, and that could be you and your buddy
mhm,
fulfilling all 5 positions of secretary, treasurer, head of whatever. Like it could be you and your buddy, but you need to have those positions filled in order to become an
mhm.
entity. So I find it really interesting and fascinating that um, the United States dictates what an organization is and how that has affected the structure of the Church of the Nazarene, which is I mean, we don't say it's a United Statesian sort of a church. It's definitely founded here, 1908 or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, and so it is very United Statesian centric in how we operate,
Mhm.
that organizational structure among how it functions, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. I was never a Nazarene. I only went to NNU, but I never like considered myself Nazarene. I guess I went to a Nazarene youth group, but I never considered myself a Nazarene.
Hmm.
But there's certain things that I admire compared to other churches in the same evangelical movement. There's certain things I admire about the Nazarenes. But I will say, like NNU in general, kind of left a bad taste in my mouth.
Oh, I thought
Um,
you said it was good
well,
overall. I'm sure you had a generally good experience, but what particularly are you thinking about?
I mean, I know this is like normal for like a Christian college or whatever, but like the evangelical college, but the enforced chapel. I was thinking about how like there was 3 chapels a week, and you had to go to an average of 2 of those chapels per
Yeah.
week. That was
Hmm.
required. Then they had Wednesday night chapel, and then
Hmm. Optional.
if
Yeah.
yeah, optional, right? But you could get chapel credit for it.
Oh. Hmm.
And then you were supposed to go to church on Sunday, obviously, as you're a Christian. So if you went to church on Sunday and then chapel twice a week, and then you could go to church 5 times a week, really, if you wanted to.
Yeah,
And
that is a
you
lot.
had to go to church twice a week, And I realized that like I was so burnt out on church. What I would do is I would go 3 times a week until I didn't have to go anymore to chapel. Didn't go on Sundays, of course, because like that's insane. Like 4 times a week would be nuts. But I'd go 3 times a week until I didn't have to go anymore.
Hmm.
And then I would stop and I would just chill, And then
Yeah.
in addition to that, we had like theology classes, biblit, like that we had to attend. And it was too much. It was too much church. And then like, they kind of are like dictating aspects of your personal life. Like you have to sign the thing that you can't drink. And then they have like this whole weird like police state around that thing where like they encourage the other students to rat on
Mhm.
other students who are drinking, right? So if you're caught drinking by somebody who is a narc, you know, at the school, the narc might turn you in to the school administration. And then, you like I know some of them they would make them go through AA, or like participate in counseling, like drug and
Hmm.
alcohol. I know I was like talking to one girl who like she had her first beer and she got narked out and they made her go to like alcohol counseling, alcohol
Huh.
abuse counseling. She had one beer and I don't know, man. Like if you were like in a girl's dorm after like a certain time, 1 minute afterwards you get like a $20 fine, and that's
Yeah.
not $20 today's money, that's $20 in like early 2000s money, right? Like
Hmm.
it was a weird like little dystopian like Stalinist regime of Christianity, of holiness Christianity, where it's like obviously nobody's getting like sent to the gulags, right? But like, you know, just the kind of the elements are there, ratting out your fellow citizens, like disproportionate punishments for minor crimes, like
Hmm.
obviously nobody got sent to the gulags, but it felt like, like 1984 alcohol free, like if like you're drinking like alcohol free beer. It's still beer, but it's alcohol free. It's like 1984 alcohol free. That's what it felt like to me. So it did. It left a bad taste in my mouth. And it's like, is this what like you all want? Is this what like you the leaders of the Church of the Nazarene want people to be like? This is the lifestyle that you want to enforce on everybody. And like you can do it because you got these kids who are paying like $20,000 to be here a
Hmm.
year. I'm sure it's a lot more than that now. Like you got these kids who sign off on this thing and it's like, but this is what you wish that everybody would live like. This is the environment that you want for all of Christianity. And it bugged me. It bugged me because like I don't know. I signed the thing so that I could go to the school because it seemed like a nice, like people are nice, like people are nice, but uh, I didn't really agree with it ever.
Hmm.
Like the lifestyle agreements, I thought they were kind of like excessive. So
Yeah, interesting.
yeah, so it always bugged me. The school always bugged me, and then like yeah, so. And then there was that case of that professor at NNU who was like hooking up with one of his students. And did you hear about that one?
No, I
Like,
mean,
yeah,
I
that
heard of
happened.
something many, many years later, but
Yeah, it
I'm
was it
not
was
sure
it was
anybody
years
heard of that.
later.
So what was
Yeah.
it?
Oh, it was years later. It wasn't while we were there. It was years later. It might have been the same thing you're talking about. But yeah, just a professor like hooking up with a student, which is like a classic
Power dynamic.
thing. that happens in schools, but at NNU, like it was this big deal. So like it just felt like icky, and it made me feel like I know that the school flipped out and fired the guy and stuff, but it's like I don't think that they're actually hypocrites. It's coming away from NNU, I actually is like, these people aren't hypocrites. They are like most of them, not the guy obviously sleeping with a student, but like most of the people at NNU, I don't think are hypocrites. I think they're like the realest G's of all, Like maybe I'm wrong, but that was the vibe I got, you know. Um,
Right. And it was very
not
Nazarene. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Because like being raised in the church and the whole evangelical movement, I suppose, all of those things, the chapel twice a week and more, three times optional, twice mandatory, once on
Four
Wednesday.
times. You could go 4 times.
Yeah, with Wednesday, and yeah.
Yeah.
Like that was all stuff I enjoyed doing. Like, true, I did kind of run out of time, and once in a while on Wednesday nights I'd skip, but like that was what I enjoyed. Like, and beer, who would want to drink? That's gross. And like, if you want to remain faithful to yourself and to your future spouse, like why would you want to spend more time in the girls' dorm? But I did once because I was finishing up watching like Beauty and the Beast, and it was like almost over, and it was like almost time to go, but I wanted to see the end of the movie, and I got out of it, and the RA or whatever was like, you came in like 2 minutes late from getting out of the girls' dorm. I'm like, it was a movie. She's like, I don't want to fine you $20 for 2 minutes. And I'm like, what you gonna do? Um,
Did you get
so
fined
she decided she
$20 for
just
2 minutes?
yeah, exactly. So she decided not to,
Oh,
but it was, I know, but it was just a movie. And I'm like, I wasn't trying to be bad. I just wanted to watch a movie. And she's like, you're putting me in such a difficult position. So the restrictions didn't feel like restrictions. They were well within the means of what I wanted to do and to be. And I think for most Nazarenes, it also made sense. And so I think from the school's perspective is like, if you don't like want to be this, like find a different college sort of a thing. But I can see how if that's not what you wanted to be and you wanted to go to school there, how that would be kind of a pain in the butt. Like, what brought you to NNU? Like, was it the closeness to home, or was it the Christian environment, or like, how did you end up there?
well, like I I was a Christian at that
Mhm.
time, and I wanted to go to a school where people were like nice, you
Mhm.
know. Um, and the people at NNU are nice. I went to Battleground High School in Battleground, Washington. And it's not that the people weren't nice people there either, but like I was always told that at a public school, they'll use their snake tongue on you, and maybe you won't be a Christian, like um and I was like, well, I want to stay being a Christian, so should go to a Christian college. So that's why I went to a Christian college. But I learned in the process of going there that I am not quite so holy and righteous as the people around me. And, they have a point about the Bible, um, that, it does seem like holiness and righteousness is very important. Which brings me to Paul. So I was writing to you about Paul before this meeting,
Mhm.
and it brings me to the LGBTQ, um, the topic at hand of
Mhm.
should LGBTQ people be considered Christians? Um, so, I don't want to monopolize the whole thing, but I have questions for you, and
Sure.
and but I'm pulling up my questions.
Yeah, you had an interesting train of thought that I kind of followed. So I'm wondering if it would be translated onto screen very well, but we'll see.
I think it will. I think you have a lot more knowledge on this topic than me, but I've read the Bible a lot, so it'd be interesting to see, if we put our minds together, what different thoughts we have on the topics. But so, the first question is, what does Paul say about salvation. And by the way, I know I'm saying it like not religious, not a Christian, whatever, but like I am actually a fan of Paul. Like I've heard this said a lot by people who aren't Christians. Like Jesus had all these great ideas. Jesus was awesome, but then Paul came in and screwed it up. I disagree. I think Paul and Jesus were kind of saying they're saying different but the same kind of things, and and Paul was a genius. But anyway, so with that preface, like we're not trying to knock Paul here, but what does Paul say about salvation? Like in other words, like what does he think Christians need to do to be saved? So what do you think on that topic? Like just if you're thinking about just Paul, right? We're not trying to get like a univocal view of scripture where it all says the same thing. But if you think about just Paul, what do you think Paul says?
Yeah, see, I don't know if I've separated my overall overarching view of the Bible, the univocal sort of view, with a specific Pauline view of salvation in a while. Like so long ago, I don't know if I could separate the two. I read a book that was so detailed about it, but I didn't think it made much sense or held much weight. I just kind of was just like poo-pooed it.
Mhm,
But I think from what I understand, and forgive me if it is the whole general theme of salvation, is um, if you want to be saved, you ask Jesus for his action, his his death and resurrection to count for you, and anybody can receive that. And then once that is accomplished, you shall or should at least bear the fruit of your saved status by doing something about it. Now, that is a difference in you don't do the works to be saved, but you do the works because you're saved. That
mhm,
delineation was very pronounced in church because people are constantly trying to pit James, the book of James, with Paul,
mhm,
who says, salvation by faith alone versus you got to do some work, you know, because you're not a Christian if you don't do the works. That sort of an argument back and forth. And so they were
mhm,
very clear to say you do the works because you're saved, not in order to be saved. Uh, and I think
mhm,
Paul would generally agree with that. Um, and I think if you were to talk with Paul in a room and say, is there any particular person that cannot be saved if they want to be saved? I think he would probably say, oh, no, anybody that wants to can be saved. But I also think that in his own mind, he would say, oh, well, people who are just horrible people, they don't want to be saved. So they're never going to get saved, and these people would include endless stuff about 10 groups of people that he just would just kind of write off.
mhm.
And I think from your perspective, he's writing a literal list first and saying these people just can't be saved, including homosexuals.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a pretty good summary of what I think Paul actually thought. Like, I don't think that Paul really thought that we're saved by grace through faith, not of works. Like, I know it says that, I think it's Ephesians where it says that, but like, I don't think he actually thought that. Like, it's possible that he wrote Ephesians, but a lot of people don't think so. The academic consensus is it's unlikely that he wrote Ephesians. It's unlikely that he wrote, you're saved by grace through faith, not of works. Um, and to me that makes sense because it doesn't jive with a lot of other things he says. I don't think that Paul thought that like grace had nothing to do with it or that like faith had nothing to do with it. I think he thought faith was the most important thing. But like you said, I think he thought that you have to actually do something about it. Otherwise, like, you're not really a Christian. So like just yeah, the verse that you're talking about is First Corinthians 6, 9 through 11, where it says, Do you not know that wrongdoers will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who have sex with men. That's the NIV translation. Nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor slanderers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. And that is what some of you were, but you were washed, you were sanctified, you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and by the Spirit of our God. So that, to me, that like totally jives with what you were just saying. Like, I don't think that Paul thought like all you got to do is believe and like you're fine. Like believe in God and then keep going out and like robbing banks. You know, I don't think that was part of
Basic theology.
Paul's
Yeah.
thing. Like I think there are some Christians who actually think that though, like that like all that matters is faith, you know,
Get your
robbing
ticket.
banks.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you'll go to jail, but you're still fine. You know, you're still going to heaven. Um, you know, I think like Christians actually think that. I don't think Paul thought that. Um, I think you have to have a very selective view
Right.
of the Bible to think that Paul thought that. And I don't really think that Jesus thought that either. Like it doesn't like if you read Jesus, he talks a lot about other stuff that has nothing to do with that. It seems like way more important to Jesus than like, you know, heaven or hell. Like he
Salvation.
seems to be talking about like a totally different topic.
Right. Yeah. And I would agree. I think Paul is fairly Hellenistic in his thinking. Like he's sort of got a view of like an afterlife that is pretty like heaven and hell ish
Yeah.
focused.
Hmm.
And I think that Jesus had 80% of his beliefs seem to be that once you die and you haven't done good things, that you haven't borne the fruit of being a child of God, that you would I forget the word for it, but just like your soul would just like disintegrate. Like there's different
Yeah.
topics. There's like disintegration dis disintegrationists that says like your soul will just like go away. Other people are like purgatory, and other people are like yeah, bifurcation of heaven and hell. And it seemed
Hmm.
like most of Jesus's ideas, if you're not looking at like a grand overview of univocality, um, that he was mostly like, yeah, you're just your soul is just gonna go away. Sort of
Yeah, you just rot away and then that's it. You're done.
yeah, you'd go to
Yeah.
the grave. Yeah.
Yeah. But
But
if you
occasionally
yeah.
he'll talk to the religious elite and those in power and say, "You're gonna go to hell," which it was specifically directed at those in power and abusing their power.
Yeah. Yeah, so like I think we agree. I think and that's a pretty Nazarene view that like that Paul doesn't think that and I think it's right, you know, actually having read Paul, I don't think Paul is just like pray the prayer and get off scot-free. Um, the Nazarenes, I will say, like they take it so far the other direction that they're like, some of them are like, well, I haven't sinned in 20 years, you know, because I'm so holy. And that's what Christianity is really about, is not sinning ever. And it's like,
Yeah,
all
that's
right, like,
one of the many flavors of the view on entire sanctification,
yeah,
which is a pretty unhealthy view. So
which is what?
a pretty unhealthy view.
Oh, yeah. Why do you think it's unhealthy?
Um, because anybody that's married to one of those people will definitely say, yeah, this person sins against me a lot. So he may say he's never sinned in 30 years. I've been married to him. Yeah, he definitely does. I get hurt all the time. He may talk the talk, but like it depends on what you mean
Yeah,
by sin, like your definitions. So I don't know a lot of people that have lived long enough to say, oh yeah, I haven't sinned in however many years. It really depends on how you define sin, right? Like an intentional, willful act against God, sort of those definitions where, oh yeah, I hurt my wife because I miscommunicated or whatever, or I was a little hangry or something. That hurts the other person, and some people could define sin as that. Like, you sinned against me. Oh, I wasn't intentional. I didn't sin. So different views on sin.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is the sort of conversation that I'm just kind of like tired of, like really tired of. Like, I don't want to be working with this sort of conversation anymore. Like this used to be like a pretty major topic in my head.
yeah,
I'm really kind of over it.
yeah, totally. No, I mean, me too. Like after so many years of NNU, like I was like, this is like I'm so burnt out on this stuff. And the interesting thing is, I think Paul sets a trap, and this is where it comes into even the LGBTQ issue, is that Paul sets a trap for Christians with the
Mm,
LGBTQ question. So the next question is like, so yeah, we talked about like who Paul thinks will definitely be not saved, where Paul draws the line on who cannot be saved and who can be saved. Like, I think, like there's a lot of people like who think that like when he's talking about like men who have sex with men, like that he lists kind of like two different words in Greek,
mhm.
and I'm not like an expert on this topic at all, right? But like one seems to be talking about, I mean, to be crude here, it's talking about tops, and the other seems to be talking about bottoms. Like, in the
Yeah,
ancient Roman world, like that you weren't you weren't like looked down on unless you were a bottom, basically. Like
right.
unless you were a twink. And like twinks were by and large mostly slaves or like people that um were in lower margins of
Yeah,
society. Um and like the tops were like, you know, um, Roman citizens who were higher up on the rung. And so it
yeah,
was considered to be like fine to be gay, do gay stuff as long as you were like a top, and unless your place was on the bottom of society, in which case it was fine to be a bottom. And like Paul seems to be saying, like, neither is fine with me. I don't neither of those categories of people can be a Christian. Like you can't hire male prostitutes. Um, but interestingly, he's also talking about pedastry too,
yeah.
like yeah, because that's also implicit in what he's talking about.
Hmm.
And I don't know, I read like a Wikipedia article on like Roman homosexuality and
Hmm.
this topic. And I was like, wow, it was just beyond messed up. Like the power dynamics and like the culture around it was pretty like by modern day standards, it was nothing like what we have in our current culture.
Right.
And I
Well,
think what
I'll just be really quick here. It feels like
yeah,
middle school. Like it feels like middle school. The whole concept of tops or twinks or whatever. Like there used to be a phrase when I was in middle school that the kids were like, "Oh, are you a this?" And we'll just use twink. And a twink is somebody that gets slapped. Whoosh. Oh, you're a twink. Or like, just
yeah,
like if you're abused, you're this. And if I abuse you, therefore you're this. And therefore I'm better than you. And it just
yeah,
felt so middle schoolish. Like, wow, you're inventing a term and then using it against me because you're abusing me. I'm a foot taller than you, dude. Like, what are you doing? Like,
yeah,
like the whole like small man syndrome sort of a thing.
oh yeah,
And that just, I know there are full cultures like that. Like there are
yeah,
some places I've heard of, like in Pakistan, Afghanistan area, where they just don't respect their mothers because they're women, and women are less than or whatever that category is. And
hmm,
so there's like whole like pockets. I'd say pockets. I'm not just going to be judgmental here. That just like men who can't say they love their moms because that would be a weak thing to say.
right,
And it just
right.
feels so middle school to me. Like, ugh. But I digress. But it
No,
still
I
goes on
mean,
today. Like that's what I
yeah,
mean. Like it still goes on. Like those pockets of like I'm better than you because I've invented a name for you, and I'm up and you're down and I'm better. It just rubs me so wrong.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like twinks is just, I mean, not using it derogatorily, um, like it's a LGBTQ term, you know, it's like I'm not trying to use it derogatorily, but Paul is like Paul, Paul doesn't like feminine, like softer
Yeah.
men, you know,
Yeah.
he obviously doesn't like but the thing about it is like I don't see it so much as
It's not an orientation.
it's not so much an orientation, although it may have been people like at the time like who would have been LGBTQ now might have been like male prostitutes, but it's not like how we consider that, you know, being LGBTQ now. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Like
Apples and
this
oranges.
idea, yeah, this idea of like you have a boyfriend and you date and you get married and
There's
like have a
mutual love and
dog.
respect. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That wasn't a
Yeah, I mean
thing. Yeah.
there's still like tops and bottoms and like twinks and bears and you know, I mean there's all sorts of different like
How do you know these
subcultures
things,
within
Joe?
because it's interesting to me. Like I'm
Yeah.
fascinated by this stuff, you know?
Like half of
Like
these words, I'm just like, what? I don't even know what you're talking about.
well, you know, like a twink is like is stereotypically like flamboyant gay guy who like, you know, has like good fashion and like clean shaven, you know. And then you got like bears who are like, you know, I don't know, if you were a gay guy, you would be a bear, right? Like just
Yeah,
like
typical
kind of
stereotypical male or whatever.
well, no, they're like, you know, they have more mass, a beard,
Oh.
you know, they
Mm.
have to have a beard, you know, you know, like bigger guys.
Hmm.
You know, like I don't know if you're big enough to be a bear, but like bears are like, you know, they have more size. They're hairy, you know. And then there's otters. That'd be like me if I was a gay dude. Like otters are like they're like skinny. They have a beard, you know. But they're like skinny. And then there's like I don't know. There's all sorts of different kinds of there's twunks. Those are like twinks, but they work out a lot, you know.
Dude,
They're
dude,
just like
I'm
really
learning so much.
yeah, that's a twink hunk, right? This is like really buff, like
Wow.
shaved gay dude. Anyway, so yeah, but none of that stuff existed back then, and
Uh-huh.
there was no like language for like I don't think. I mean, this stuff existed, right? But like there was no language for like um about consent or like you know mutual love and respect. That wasn't like part of it. It was just
And, and
like it
and
was
no mention of
yeah
orientation either. Like as
yeah
like a
yeah.
like because it I'm gonna let you finish, but like David and Nathan, like it seemed like they really loved each other. Like loved in a
Hmm.
like mutual, like it could just be friends, like really, really close friends. But it also
Uh-huh.
looks like David could have had like bi ideas and like really liked Nathan, but like the only way to have a king and be a king is to have concubines and babies and women and all this stuff. And so like he couldn't imagine how he could be in society and have a lineage, which was very important, you know, son of David, you know, that
Hmm.
sort of thing, without
Right.
having an offspring. And you can't have an offspring with a boy. So like it was just like not on his radar, sort of like it
Hmm.
wasn't conceptually available in their frame of mind.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, David was like, I mean, by that account, like David was probably more free to like express his sexuality than most men are today. Because like on one hand, it seems pretty obvious that David was into women. Like he
Yeah, yeah,
he wouldn't have like seen Bathsheba taking a bath and
yeah,
gone after her and like had her husband killed in the
yeah,
line of duty if like he wasn't into
exactly.
that, you know. But at the
Uh-huh.
same time, then he talks about like having my love for you is like that of my love for a woman. It's like, okay, yeah, they're besties, just you know, just bros. Uh-huh, sure.
Uh-huh.
He's probably like bisexual or what you call like pansexual today. Probably. I mean, but who knows, right? So, but yeah, you're right. I don't think they had like an orientation where they put everybody in the box. But I guess my overarching point is, why is even orientation Why are all of these ideas, and why is pedastry and pedophilia so looked down upon in our culture? And like you have the answer right there staring at you in Paul. Like, sexual immorality, that included pedastry. He's saying like, don't be pedos, guys. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason, I mean, I think of Christianity under Paul as being a radical social movement against all the sleaze. He's like talking about, like, on that list, it's like easy to be like, oh, he's being so judgmental and stuff. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but like I agree with like a lot of it. Like
Mm-hmm.
pedos, sure, toss them in prison. Like swindlers, yeah, lock them up. You know what I
But
mean? Like,
yeah.
yeah. And so like, but why do I think that? It's because of Christianity. Because Christianity became, the religion of the Roman Empire, and they ultimately took over, that they became the religion of 1 billion people or something, and their values became the social norms, so I think like, yeah, like I don't agree with Paul that in the modern sense of being gay, that I'm sure he wouldn't have been a fan of it if he was to be alive today, but like I don't agree with Paul that the modern sense of being gay is bad. Like I think it's good. Like I think it's, if people want to be gay, then it's great. If people want to be trans, I'm full support. Like I don't agree with Paul, but
Uh,
and
but
like I do agree with him in terms of what he was reacting against, you know,
yeah.
like like you were saying about like when you look at Roman culture, like it irks you. It seems like middle school. It seems abusive. It seems
Mhm.
really crappy. It's like, yeah, like I agree with Paul that that stuff sucked, you know?
And what's
Like,
interesting is when you reread that verse, it said,
mhm,
these people don't get into heaven. Idolaters, swindlers, blah, blah, blah. And those things you used to be. Okay. So he clearly seems to think that uh that it's like not an orientation to be an idolater or a swindler or whatever, but that those are choices, right? Those are choices. And he
right.
clearly doesn't understand that like an orientation is a completely different thing. Why? Because we found out in like 61 or something like late 1800s that
Mhm,
there was a thing called an orientation where that's just like that's what you're interested in. And when that word came out, and I wrote this in the chapter in the book that I wrote with Dr. Ord,
mhm,
when that word came out, it married the term homosexuality to the orientation and the sex acts.
mhm,
So so if you did the sex acts, you're homosexual. If you were
mhm,
oriented in that way, you're homosexual. So it didn't decouple those. It just said homosexuality is this category with both. And that is where the Church of the Nazarene is really struggling because on paper they say it's okay to have the orientation, just agree to remain celibate, never have sex. And
mhm,
technically, it should be okay for a pastor who is a LGBTQ member to have a significant other of the same sex, agree to never have sex, agree to never even get married, but just be together and lead a church and be a pastor. But no, the idea is anathema and icky. Why? Because the term does not separate the acts from the orientation. And if you're a homosexual, Paul says, you do not inherit the kingdom of God. But that doesn't separate the orientation from the acts. And so because the word came after the Bible, and then the word was put in there later, like homosexuality wasn't even in the English version of the Bible until late 1800s, which is very, very, very modern. Now
mhm,
that's when all the anti-homosexuality stuff came out, because
mhm,
before it used to say, "Don't be a pedophile, don't be a pederasty, don't be effeminate or whatever." And I think it's because of the coupling of the orientation and the X came to be. I think that has a large part to do with it.
Yeah. If you look at that list of like Paul's like this is who's gonna be not getting into heaven, just kind of going through it, like if you replace sexually immoral just for the sake of like brevity here, if you replace sexually immoral with pedophiles, um, you know, idolaters, I mean, not Christians, right? Adulterers, nobody likes people who cheat on their significant other. Um, and skip over men who have sex with men. Thieves, thieves go to prison. Greedy, I think that's funny because it's like, people who read Ayn Rand, I don't know, like, are they going to hell? I don't know. Drunkards, like, I don't know, people with substance use issues, I guess, like
Mhm.
maybe. Slanderers, I don't know. You can get sued for slandering people.
Well,
Swindlers, like nobody likes getting swindled. Fraud is a crime. Uh, so like, you know, it's not like Paul is saying like, yeah, you're right. He's talking about choices, but like, yeah, men who have sex with men, if you kind of transport this to like the modern setting and you say like gay people, gay men, if being gay is an orientation and it's like this is what they want, this is what they're into, um, which I like you said, it's a pretty modern conceptualization. Not
mhm.
really what Paul is talking about, but like just trying to transport Paul into modern times, right? Then like if you are gay and you're living, your gay life and you're not hurting anybody and you're like not a swindler and you're not a thief and you're not, you know, a problem drinker, whatever, like
Mhm.
you're just a good person, then like I would say like being gay by the absolute worst thing you could say about it in that is that like it's like a inbuilt like what you'd call it like a character flaw, like something that you're never gonna not be gay, and like you're never gonna not be attracted to men. And
Mhm.
Jesus says like, if you lust after somebody, it's the same as committing adultery with them in your heart. So like
Right.
even that, if you try to make scripture univocal, like even if you just want to have sex with other dudes, it's a sin. It's a problem. So what that means to me is if you go down that road too far,
Mhm.
then what you're saying is basically not only uh, are people who actually do bad things should not be Christians, but people who have minor issues that aren't socially acceptable also shouldn't be Christians. You know what I mean? Like people who have character flaws that maybe aren't necessarily harmful to anybody else, but like what's considered a character flaw, whatever dumb thing people decide is a character flaw. Huh?
One of the things he lists is just being greedy.
Yeah, being greedy. So he leads you down, he leads you on a uh little philosophical theological trap here,
Mm.
because who in the world doesn't have a thing that isn't a little bit off of like
Mhm.
whatever the perfect Christian, stupid perfect Christian ideal is? Like make up a standard, define a standard of like what's perfectly socially acceptable and
Mhm.
healthy and not sinful. Who in the world can only 100% of the time fit into that fit into that standard? Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody. It
So
goes
nobody
back to what
can.
we were talking about, like holiness. Like Nazarenes read it correctly, I think. Not, no, actually, I think they read it wrong. I think Paul is talking about a radical social movement. He's talking about actions. He's talking about like, hey, don't be a piece of crap. You know what I mean? Like, but if you read it like the Nazarenes read it, it's basically saying like, well, if you have things that are like, not socially acceptable, a little bit too beastly, or like, ooh, you're dancing, or you're drinking, those are social shortcomings, those are sins. And if you have something like that, it's not just an action, but like a thing that you just can't get over, such as a sexual orientation, you can't be a Christian. My thing is, who among us doesn't have something that's not a little bit of a wrinkle, like a little bit of a rascal, to use
Mm,
Alan Watts's term? Nobody, it doesn't have a bit of a rascal within them.
mm,
Everybody has some sort of problem, that they can't get over. And the reason why I keep hammering on this talk about like psychopaths and like talking about like that in earlier episodes of the Forrest and Joe show is because I don't think like a psychopath is ever not going to be a psychopath, right?
right. Yeah.
Right? The psychopath is always going to do that. Like, and a gay person is always going to be gay,
Hmm.
you know? Paul supposes that a leopard can change its spots. Like there's that song like Shine by the Newsboys where he talks about like, shine, make them wonder what you got, all this stuff. He talks about when you let it shine, you will inspire the kind of inside turnaround that would make a bouncer take ballet, even bouncers who aren't happy, that uh, you might make a strict dictator retire, fire the army, teach the poor origami. You remember that song, right? They're saying that like a leopard can change its spots. Like he says, like when you let it shine, um, that you might inspire a schizophrenic to put down their crayons. Like you might, like the power of God is such that you might like heal people of their schizophrenia so far as that. And like I don't think so. I don't think so. When Paul says that's what some of you were, it's clear that some of them still are. They're still doing all that old stuff because they were before, and now they still are. And he's getting mad about it. He's yelling at First Corinthians, the Corinthians, about doing what they were doing before. Now that they're Christians, it's like, well, what did you think was going to happen, right? Like,
Mm.
it doesn't mean you shouldn't try to be a better person or like improve yourself. But like if you take it to the point that the Nazarenes take it, or a lot of Christians take it, nobody can be a Christian. If gay people can't be a Christian, then nobody can be a Christian.
Mm. Yeah.
Like everybody's got something, and most people have something that no matter what they do, they're not going to be able to like, get out of it. Paul even says like that he had a thorn in his side that he couldn't get rid of.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's talking about, but
Yeah.
like, yeah, but I mean, like everybody's got something, and the people that don't have something or think they don't have something are really the people you got to look out for because they're like, they're
Delusional.
some of the most delusional and like frustrating people of all, and like most difficult to deal with. So
Yeah.
like yeah, it's a trap. It's a trap. If you go down that rabbit hole, like to where even like lusting after somebody is a problem, then like nobody can be a Christian.
What I think is a good thing to mention after all that is there's a lot of things in the Bible. If you follow down to the logical conclusion, it's impossible. So many things are impossible. A lot of things are used as metaphors that, if you follow them to the logical conclusion, just don't make sense. Like, at what point, the greedy are not allowed to be in the kingdom of heaven? Like, how much greed is too greedy? And you
Yeah,
said something about some fallacy of like sands or something like that. I hadn't heard of that.
it's the heap of sand paradox.
I haven't
Yeah.
heard of that one. Describe that one.
So, uh, yeah. So that's the trap right there. Is like, uh, how many grains of sand equals a heap, right?
Yeah.
Is it 1,000? So are you telling me you have 999 grains of sand? That's
Yeah.
not a heap? What about 998? Could you show the average person 998 grains of sand and they would be able to tell you the difference between that and 1,000?
Right.
I know that one grain of sand isn't
It's not
a
a
heap,
heap.
but is it
Yeah.
two? Is it three?
Yeah.
Like at what point, it's impossible to say really. And I think that's the problem that you run into
Yeah,
is
and I think
like,
that's what we're talking
yeah,
about is
yeah,
the logical conclusion to these terms that don't have a specific endpoint, like idolatry. Like if you look up like what idolatry is, we're not just talking about statues. It's like whatever you are like putting your time and effort into. So like if your whole house is like a specific sports team theme and like you're all about sports, you think about sports all the time, you want to miss church, you don't even want to be in church because like you just want to watch the football game, you're all about that. Like you might even say like God is first. Like but get on first, or sports theme or whatever, like it's an idol like, but at what point, like, are you not a part of the kingdom of heaven? I don't think those are even. I think those are kind of terms and this not slippery slope, but like grains of sand thing that just like it doesn't make sense. And so like I'm not in that world anymore. I'm just like that. None of that makes sense. It's not what I'm going for. Dr. Ord
yeah,
was very, very into God is love. Like he is nothing but love. And I'm like, love is an action that people do. Love is, it can also be a feeling, but the feeling is some sort of different brain waves that form a emotional sensation, I suppose. But even the wave of the brain waves, this certain form of energy that pulses through your head is a feeling. It's an action within and of a person that requires time and and action. So like how could God be anything but a person who and my biggest beef with Dr. Ord at the time was it sounds like your version of God is a force and not a person who.
mhm,
Like, I think God is love as a metaphor. Like, you can't be love. You can't be an action of service or an action of good intent. Like, like good intent means nothing if time froze and all you had was a three-dimensional, like, still shot of people. Like, even me smiling at you does not say that I love you. It just is, and that is not love. Love requires time and action and fluidity. And I'm like, how can you say that God is love? But I railed against this because like on his triangle of things that was like pick one, is God all knowing, is God all powerful, or is God all loving? And I marked off that God is all knowing and all powerful but not all loving because the Bible has several instances where he's not very nice. He's kind of a jerk to some particular people. And I kept arguing in my papers like God chooses to love and might even choose to always love. But and because he's all knowing, he knows the best way to love, and we might not even perceive that this is a loving act. Um but I think he needs to have the capacity to not love, or else love, like, kind of has no meaning, and then it's a force, and then he's no longer a person, he's a robot. Like, the whole idea of free will, like, that we can choose to do right or wrong, should apply to God, or else we as people who have the choice to do right and wrong are somehow have greater capacity than God, who cannot do anything other than love. So that
mhm,
was my biggest beef with Dr. Ord. Is like, you're saying that God is like a robot who cannot do anything other than love. And that
mhm,
basically depersonifies this God. And
mhm.
those machinations in my head have been going on for forever, which almost led me to psychosis, minor psychosis. Like just thinking like, oh, God is not good. I do not like God. This is why I hate. How can I say I hate God? Like all of those ruminations, which kind of drove me crazy. And then I had, some very thankful personal spiritual encounters, which kind of just melted all those ruminations away, but did not explain them away either. But I am so grateful for being out of those really hard to deal with feelings and questions and thoughts.
Mhm.
I'm glad I'm out of them. But now I wonder, going into different philosophies and religious streams that I've been dabbling in, whether it's not a both and. Can God both be a person and a force?
Mm.
Um, and not knowing how that is possible in this current view of mine of what a person is my own sort of on pause, sort of I'm stuck on, because
Mm.
I can believe that God can be all loving, and view him in that way, but in some ways it is hard to personify a force. And yet I
Mhm.
still feel like I have a relationship with God. It's just hard to envision a person as a continual force. It just
Yeah.
loses conceptual meaning in my mind. So thank you for bearing with
Mm.
that. I have not articulated that very well to anybody, but that is kind of where I am in my mental state. Is it is hard for me to envision God as a person and a force, but that's kind of where I'm stuck in my visualization of who God is, and where I believe in the meta existence of reality. That makes sense.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like when people have near-death experiences, they kind of describe God as like a light, you know,
mhm.
um, this like
Not a very
overwhelming.
personal, yeah, not a very
Yeah,
personal sort of a thing, is it?
yeah, but they still feel like overwhelming love from that light. They describe it as like brightest light you could possibly imagine, and the
But
most
not
intense
blinding.
love. Yeah, but like the most intense love you could possibly imagine coming from a light. So like, yeah, but if coming back to like, what does it mean to be a Christian? I have to agree with anybody who says that like they believe in Jesus. I think if somebody believes in Jesus, like then they are a Christian. If they say they're a Christian and they believe in Jesus, then they are a Christian. Like I think if you try to say only a true Christian does these things and acts this way, then you fall into the no true Scotsman fallacy, which is
Mhm.
like, do you know about the no true Scotsman fallacy? You know that
Right.
one? Yeah. Yeah, like the I don't know, Edinburgh slasher is at it again, killing people like serial killer, and they're interviewing people on the news, and the guy's like, he's not a true Scotsman. A true Scotsman would never kill their countrymen. It's like, no, he's a Scotsman because he's from Scotland. You know, it's like the no true Scotsman fallacy. Like, I think if you believe in Jesus, then you're a Christian. I don't give a lot of weight to the true Christians, the real G's kind of like attitude about Christianity. But if you say you're not, then you're not. And does it really matter whether you are or not? I don't think it does. But that's what I
Right.
think. It's like if you say you're a Christian and you think and you believe in Jesus, then you're a Christian. Doesn't mean that you necessarily are a good person, but
Hmm.
yeah.
Right. And then I think I'm a universalist. I
Hmm.
think basically everybody is going to a good place when they die, or something similar to that. And so, like, at what point does it matter that you say you believe in Jesus? Um, at that point, like,
Yeah.
what meaning or what value does it have to say that from my perspective?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think like it matters to Christians, I guess. Like
Which is
it
probably
matters
our
to
primary audience. I mean, like, who is our audience? I don't even know.
don't even know. I don't even know. Like I think talking about Svetlana, like the last episode, how she died, and then I talked to her in a dream, and I was like, um, you know, is it good on the other side? No, not really. Is it bad? No, not really. Like I was thinking about that. It's like she wants to be here, like, and I was thinking about like the Christian doctrine of resurrection and also the doctrine, what a lot of people believe about reincarnation is that people have multiple lives that they live, that spirits incarnate, like I'm an incarnated being and you're an incarnated being, and this is just one of our many experiences in this world. And I was thinking like maybe it's not so much that like um people come here because it's like a punishment or like it's a difficult time. Maybe they come here because they really want to. And maybe if you do enough crappy stuff, you don't get to come back. It's not like you're being punished. It's not like you're being, tortured for all of eternity. You get to ride on the giant, the giant butterflies' backs and surf in the waves and like, do all this stuff that, people talk about near-death experiences that sounds really great and stuff. But like you're vibrating just too low of an energy to come back here.
Mhm.
Like people want to be here. Like maybe that's what it's all about. Is like this is like a really interesting place, and
Mhm.
people want to be here. So when Jesus says like, when people talk about like, well, you never come back, you never get to experience this thing. But if you, are a good person and live a good life, you are resurrected. Well, maybe that's kind of what he's trying to point us to is like this is a like you say, it's like experiences, it's an adventure. You've been talking a lot about that. It's an adventure, it's a place you that you chose, so evil isn't so much about like, you know it's not so much about like this like punishment thing. It's more about like experience. It's more about like, well, you were bored over there, so you came here so you could experience something different. And so here you are experiencing what you wanted to experience. And you've been getting at that idea a lot.
Yeah.
Like maybe like that's what Jesus and like Paul and a lot of other religious leaders are pointing us at is that like, like being a good person, like doing the right thing, not like abusing and using other people is like kind of like how you keep your energy up enough so that you can keep coming back here. And
Mm.
that's what a lot of like near death experience type people kind of say.
Mm.
So I don't know. It's just a thought. Um, just a thought.
Yeah. My thought, one of the thoughts while you were talking was like, I feel like this existence is so much a part of like a narrative, like a grand narrative, like a story. And all the stories that I've seen, both in movies, books, even playing role-playing games like D&D, there's the game, and then there's the real life that is like behind and making the game. So,
Mm-hmm.
like even in shows like Star Trek, there's several times when the characters like die and meet some sort of a spiritual person, but that's still in the story, like they don't
Right.
meet their maker. They meet a heaven experience that the maker has put in there. And
Mhm.
and I find that both a little cheeky and a little funny to think of it like that. Um
Oh yeah.
so at what point are our perceptions like even still a part of the story? Because I've
Right.
played enough D&D to know that, like, sometimes you might see your divine, you're the god that you are, pray to as a video game player.
Mm-hmm.
But you're like, we're the creators of this game. We could do anything. We could be like, and then there was a purple unicorn dragon that swooped in and ate your character or whatever. Just
Mm-hmm.
be like, that's canon now. Like that really happened. We're gonna write that in. But it's a game, but we're playing it. We're affected by the stories that we play as real people around the table. Yet we're also not affected. So I don't know where I was going with that, except that like, oh, to wonder at how far the game goes in our perception and how much of our experiences are even a part of the stories that we find ourselves to be in, or are still a part of the game, or how much is touching our real spirits, our real like whoever's like playing us above. That's some
Mhm.
trippy stuff that I like to ruminate on, but have no answers for. So
Yeah, I mean, if near-death experiences are just part of the simulation too. It's like,
hmm
what was that comedian who talks about like life is so weird that like after I die, literally nothing would surprise me. He's like, if the afterlife is just a bunch of like cats rolling around and like playing with balls of yarn, that would not surprise me in the slightest. Like nothing would surprise me because life is so weird. Like the whole idea of existence is just bizarre. It's like, yeah, I mean, like maybe it is just like a D&D game, and it's like, even the near-death experiences are kind of like you're saying, like part of the game. You go to a light. What do you do? Roll a d20 to go into the light or return.
yeah.
You rolled a nat 20. Good. You get to go back. I mean,
uh-huh.
could be that. I don't know. I wonder. I mean, yeah, it could be just like you die and then like, like you've seen Rick and Morty. Have you
No,
watched
I
that?
hear it's really good, but I also like have seen enough of it to know that it's pretty raunchy and pretty gross. Um, and kind of my threshold is like Futurama, um,
Mm.
level inappropriateness. Like I haven't really even seen very many Simpsons episodes because like they're kind of like socially messed up as a family. I'm sorry. So Rick and Morty, I've seen enough to be like, I don't know if I want to watch it, but maybe it's good enough. I don't know.
Did we talk about Roy last time? Or we
I
had
don't
ever
know.
talked about Roy?
Mm-mm.
This is like he goes to this like one of Morty and his grandpa Rick, you know, they're flying around in spaceships all over like the multiverse. And they go to this alien planet where they have like an arcade, like an intergalactic arcade.
Mm.
And one of the games is Roy. It's a game called Roy. And his grandpa Rick says, "Oh, you gotta play Roy, Morty." And Morty's like, "Okay, Rick." And so he hooks up, he puts on this helmet that covers his eyes. And Roy is just like he's just like living the life of a normal man.
Mhm,
Roy is like an everyman, but
mhm,
he's like completely immersed in the experience. So he doesn't
mhm,
even know that he's playing. He thinks that he is Roy, right? And he like lives his whole life. He beats cancer, you know, has normal struggles that people have. And
mhm,
then like he has a carpet store and like as an older guy, he's in his like 50s or 60s, like he's like closing up shop at his carpet store. And then like the carpets, like something happens to where the carpets fall on him and smashes him and he dies. And he rips the helmet off. He's like, what? Like, what's going on? And Morty's like, or Rick's like, you did so great. Good job, Morty. You beat cancer. I was like, yeah. And he's like, what was that? He's just like completely flabbergasted because for like an entire lifetime he thought he was Roy, you know.
mhm,
And then like later it shows more or Rick playing the game, the grandpa who's obviously more familiar with Roy, and he's playing the game while having a conversation with Morty. So he's got like the goggles on, so he can't see anything, but he's like, yelling at Morty about something while he's playing Roy, because he's like he's played it so many times that he just
mhm.
knows what's going on. Like he's figured it out in the game, which I think is funny. Anyway.
There's a lot of Star Trek episodes like that. Like The Inner Light is one of the best episodes of Star Trek. And Captain Picard encounters a probe that is the last dying message of a planet. Like the planet is like has run out of water and has like everybody died. But they put this simulation in a probe, and anybody that encounters it, zap, like the captain or whoever gets sucked into this world in the
Mhm.
last like 50 years of the planet. And he lives out an entire lifetime with this random lady trying to figure out how to save the world because all the water's leaving. And like he comes back out of it like after the episode is done, and he now knows how to play this flute that he learned how to play in the simulation, and in the probe was a flute, and so he like takes it and plays it, and like his whole life was changed. And then Mr. O'Brien, the like transporter engineer guy, there's an episode where he was accused of doing a crime, and so the planet that he was visiting just said, "Oh, we're gonna put him in prison for 40 years." But it's just like that. So like it's over now. Like what? Where's the sense of justice? It's like, well, nothing really happened to him. Like he served his time, even if he was guilty. I mean, even if he was innocent, it didn't ruin his life. It's just 40 seconds, 40 years a second or whatever. And so he comes out of it, and we see all of his experiences where he was friends with an inmate, and then he got upset with him and like killed his like roommate in the prison, and covered it up and all this other stuff. And I was surprised he didn't get more time for that or whatever. But he comes out, and he's so used to sleeping on the hard floor because they didn't provide mats in the virtual prison, that like he can no longer sleep in his soft bed with his wife. He now sleeps on the floor in real life. And it did affect him, it's like mentally like
Right.
stuck. And I love episodes like that. It's just there's something that rings so true about them. So I'm like, I don't know. There was another Rick and Morty thing I'd seen on TikTok where he becomes every single person on the planet, and Rick
Mhm.
is trying to get him out.
Hmm.
I think Rick's the grandpa guy, right?
Yeah.
He's trying to
I-
get his son out, but he has to convince every single person on Earth that he is the same person playing multiple different characters, and he needs to
Right.
like get them all together to agree that they are one person, and then head out because he's stuck in the
Yeah.
video game.
It's mind bending for sure. Yeah. It's like,
Yes.
I should probably get back to my family. But my thesis is I agree with Paul in that, like, if somebody is like a real, piece of garbage, criminal, whatever, you probably don't put them in charge of your church,
Hmm.
and it probably should kind of discourage those kind of people from being in your church if you're a Christian. And when I say piece of garbage, I mean like somebody who's like a pedo or like, a criminal or something, like unrepentant criminal or whatever, just like a really crappy person. Like,
Hmm.
just like, there's a-holes, like just people that are really problematic. Sure, yeah, like, but like
Shoo them
you
away.
can't, like it's like I know when I see it. Everybody knows when they see it. Like it's that those kind of people are just they just create problems. They just they're they're really difficult. And like making them like the centerpiece of your church or even like holding them up, bad idea, right? Like give them the boot, show them the door, right? But so I agree with Paul around that. And I also agree that like Roman ethics around sexuality were completely messed up and like beyond like our imagination, I think, in this day and age. And it's good that it's beyond our imagination in this day and age. And like the fact that we have Christianity to thank for that, like it's great. It's great. But let's not pretend like two gay guys like moving in and adopting a dog or even a kid that they love is anything like that. Let's not pretend like that's the same thing. It's not. If you find somebody's behavior distasteful, anytime you point, a finger at somebody, like there's three fingers pointing right back at you. It says not that in the Bible, but something similar, right? And that's from the big man himself. So like gay people can be Christians.
Hmm.
Just they can be gay, they can do whatever gay stuff they want to do. They can be Christians. It's not It's so dumb. But I understand why people feel that way. Like it's just misapplying. It's misapplying something. And if you're gonna go there, then again, who can be a Christian? If it's just about like minor, like victimless crimes or like character flaws, then like nobody can be a Christian. So like that's my thing. And that's, I mean, I was like, I have character flaws, minor character flaws. I guess I can't be a Christian. And I was like, fine, I'm out. See ya. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
there's things, there's ways that like when I was a Christian, there's ways that I was like, I'm not like jiving with this thing. Like I'm not perfect. I'm not holy. I'm definitely not sinless. So like, but I'm also not gonna change because it's like who I am. I'm a little bit more worldly than like Forrest over here, you know? And like I
I don't
don't
know,
even
man.
want to change. I don't even want to change, you know? So like I'm out, see ya. And it's funny because like, you know, I think that's like telling.
Mhm.
It's telling about evangelical Christianity. Um, yeah,
Yeah. And just like you were saying, there's something in the Bible that is along the lines of one finger pointing and three pointing back at you. It's the whole judge not lest ye should be judged. Whatever measure you use will be pressed down, firmly packed in, overflowing. So I'm like, if you have a little bit of a judgment, you're going to get a walloping in return. So like
right.
my philosophy is based on that verse alone. Like everybody's in. Like sure, like if I say you're not in, then that means like there's like 10 times more of a likelihood that I'm not in. So like I'm just gonna say everybody's in because
Yeah,
I don't want the judgment thrown back at me. So
yeah.
everybody's in. I'm
Seriously.
universalist. So
Yeah. Well, and like I'm fine with having a floor on things, right? Because like there's things where I guess I would say like when you were just talking right now, like there's things where I will judge somebody for doing something that I kind of want to do, you know? And
right.
like I
Especially when I'm
like
dieting, I'm just like, how dare you? How dare you eat that cake? Because I really want it. Like
yeah,
that happens way
yeah,
too much to me. Yeah.
yeah. I have a friend in high school who was like kind of like the makeout king, you know. He was always like hooking up with like all these
Wow.
girls and like he was super popular with the women. But he was also super popular in church and I was like, how dare he like be so pretend spiritual when he's like doing all this stuff, like just being kind of a sleaze. And And then like, you know, like 10 years later, I found myself like being the same, not being the makeout king, but definitely doing stuff that I would have thought was super sleazy and like way sleazier than anything I thought he did. And I was like, you know,
Yeah.
but I mean, obviously, then there's things that I just really don't even want to do that I can't even like get myself in the mindset of somebody who would want to do. So, and in those cases, I don't find myself getting mad so much. You know what I mean?
More
Like,
like confused.
you
Yeah.
know, yeah, like I'm like, yeah, let's keep the pedos out of church. Great. Yeah, let's keep them out. No pedos in church. But I also don't really understand. Like, they don't even make me mad. I'm just like, they're just so harmful. Like, we got to keep people safe from them. You know what I mean? So like, I think there's a little bit of a difference. Like, I still do think that it's okay to have a floor on like the kind of person that you would have, at least that you would hold up as like a example, you know,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure, you know, but even just to have around, like, I, I, I think there's limits, but it's not such a high bar as most churches would make it, I guess.
Yeah. I
I don't
think
know.
God is pretty, I mean, God in my imagination is more like the counselor that has unconditional positive regard to people
Hmm.
and a healthy dose of knowing what the other person is feeling and experiencing. So I really think that even pedos probably have a reason for why that is completely understood by God in such that God can still love them and accept them exactly where they are and love
Right.
them. Obviously not wanting them to continue to do harm to other people, but that's how I believe like God operates is like he knows the perspective and can still love and forgive more than we are have capacity to understand. And that's okay. We don't have to understand.
Yeah, and I would say too, like there's a difference between what I would say like a healing, like holy religious environment that's designed to like help people grow and learn to love each other should be focused on, which is what I think church should be, right? And like
Yeah.
what how society should and how society as a whole should treat like the marginalized, which would include pedophiles. Like I think on one hand, like we should be doing a lot more around like prevention and like understanding it and like more work around like just kind of like healing that aspect of our society, which is there, it's there. Can't deny it. So like yeah, I'd say there's like a difference between like trying to create a community where like
Mm,
we uphold and exemplify the best aspects of humanity, and
right.
we encourage people to be the best parts of themselves, and like how we deal with like people that are doing the worst things that we can think of. I would say like you can hold both things.
Right.
And I agree with you. It's like I think somebody could become like that, and like I'm sure it doesn't help their chance, going with what I was talking about earlier. I think it certainly doesn't help their chances of reincarnating on the earth, but I don't think it means that they go to hell or whatever, because I don't think there's a hell.
Yeah. Maybe next time we can talk about our ideals of what church should be, or what the purpose of church is, because um, I noticed we have some diverging ideals for what church is or should be or something. Not that it's bad; it's
Yeah.
just different perspectives. And one thing before
Yeah.
I go, I really am curious about the lighting behind the tree sticker that you have. I completely don't understand it. Like, it looks like a wall, and yet looks like an opaque sticker. Like, how does that work?
I don't know, it is weird, but it is just a wall.
Huh.
It's not an opaque sticker.
It
I
looks
just
like
have
the
one of
sun is
those.
coming through it.
I know, but it's because it's light reflecting.
Oh,
It's got one
okay.
of those things.
Okay. And the
Yeah.
the lamp light is just really strong on your right shoulder. That it looks like the sun is going through the trees. Like, look at your image. It looks like the sun is like literally coming through the fog light, which is really cool, like from my perspective. Ooh,
It's so
that's very cool.
spiritual.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Well, good conversation for us. It was long. It went long this time. We had a lot to talk about.
Yeah, that's okay. It's good. I still enjoy talking about it. And
Yeah.
I got
Me
one
too.
comment saying thanks for sharing your video. And can you please tell me how to do the eye thing that you were talking about, the eye trick? So I'm like, okay, maybe someday. That's just funny. Out of all the deep spiritual stuff, he's like, show me how to do the eye thing because I don't understand that. I'm like, okay, sure.
Hey, it means you watched it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that's funny.
It is.
Okay, Forrest.
All right. Peace, Joe. We'll see you later.
See you later.